This is Reality Dispatch, written by Jim Mintz.
The glare was blinding in the afternoon sun as it set over Los Angeles on a Tuesday. The news was rife that the National Guard had increased its numbers to prepare for the increase in protesters, or vandals as the federal government referred to them. Roger Dayton did not hold a view either way. He could see merit in the arguments of both sides. It was excessive to send in the troops to control their own citizens. On the other hand, the protesters had been inundated with mask-wearing anarchists whose numbers had grown over the days. Roger was wise enough not to take a rental car into the eye of the storm and hitches a ride with the Australian and British newscasters who had a fleet on the ground, sending their own reporters into the lion's den on the off chance that blood on the screen would be captured in time for the evening news. "I really appreciate it," he said to the young, upstart, London-born journalist whose glistening eyes did not hide the fact that this was her first assignment. "Don't mention it," she said. "We're all in this together," she declared, a sentiment Roger did not share. They arrived in downtown from the airport 40 minutes later to a barrage of eggs, spray paint cans, and glass bottles hurled at the van from all angles. The fracas delayed their decision to exit the van. Roger was keen to take himself out of the vehicle and do what he did best, blend into the crowd and away from the obnoxious news insignia that painted itself a target. "Don't do it, brother. I'm telling you it's suicide." The camera operator who doubled as a driver yelled at him as he pulled on the locked handle. "Unlock the door now, or you're going to have a problem in here too," Roger threatened in his most intimidating voice. He knew that the cameraman would understand this stance. The livelihood of those who carried glass in an optical fashion rested on their ability to capture what needed to be photographed. The driver was stopping Roger from making a living. The lock clicked, and Roger slid it to one side, jumping out as soon as he could to seal those too scared to venture into the streets back inside. He saw the face of the junior journalist as the door slammed shut. The fear in her eyes he recognized from the many war zones he had covered. It was a fear he knew she'd shake one day, but that day would not come to her for several years. Roger walked amongst the protesters and anarchists who crowded the streets. The sun set lower in the sky, but the streetlights did not illuminate the sidewalks, creating a darker than usual atmosphere. To counter this, the anarchists began setting fire to whatever was nearby that could burn for a prolonged period. There were already burnt-out cars that would not relight, so the focus was turned to vehicles and instruments that had not been set on fire. A newly parked hatchback, possibly used by a protester to gain access to the protest zone, had a Molotov cocktail thrown through the window. The smashed glass drew his attention to point his lens in its direction and press the shutter over and over. Another smash on the distance sounded the alarm of another Molotov cocktail going through the front shield of a news van. Roger pointed his lens in its direction and snapped a sea of night-clad protesters with raised fists cheering the sight of the van on fire. As he put the lens down and pulled the viewfinder away from his eye, Roger recognized it as the van that brought him downtown from the airport. It was at that moment that the industrial-grade fireworks, the smoke from the van, the tear gas, and rubber bullets from the encroaching National Guard all aligned into an explosion 7 to 8 feet from Rogers's location. He hadn't fully come to terms with his surroundings, but within the vicinity of the cocktail of explosives and gas were 3 protesters, 5 on-duty SWAT police officers, and Roger. All had their eyes, noses, and throats exposed to the substances that permeated. Only Roger could see clearly than those who surrounded him. From what limited vision he could gather, those not affected by the chemicals and the smoke were closing in on the cops, whereas a series of masked-up cops were drawing their batons on the blinded civilians. Roger's vision cleared and fogged over with every rub of his eyes until the smears of dirt and toxins made him completely blind to the threat. He felt the camera dangling off his neck and smacking into his waist. He felt a hand grab the strap, and he kicked at the owner until they let go. He began clicking the shutter as he spun in circles, hoping to get a glimpse of the chaos that would erupt when these two groups unleashed on their blinded adversaries. "There's a baby here! There's a baby here!" He screamed from the top of his lungs. It was instinctive. It was all he had. He had no weapons and no deterrents to stop the violence except his words, and he wondered what effect, if any, they would have. The life of an innocent, he believed, thrust into the heart of chaos would be the only hope of quashing the murderous desires of those marching in. "What'd he say?" Roger heard someone mutter. "There's a baby in there. We gotta help it." Another yelled out, "New order. Cease all fire and assist the citizens. Find the baby!" Yelled out the voice of an official. "Copy, sir," came the compliant responses from a series of soldiers. Roger could not see the effect of his lie, but the audio indications were evident. Disaster may have been temporarily averted. He felt around for a safe place to rest where he wasn't so vulnerable. A set of hands reached out for him and escorted him to a van, where the flashing blue and red lights indicated a sense of safety. There, the relief of cold water pouring over his eyes gave him a welcome sense of gratitude so that he could resume his duties in capturing the chaos. For now, though, he was allowed to rest for a minute.
For more stories of fact-based fiction, head to jimmins.substack.com.